I've heard it said that the faucets, knobs, and lighting are like the jewelry of your room, but it's a common question. Can I have silver kitchen faucets and a brass light fixture? The concept causes most of us to pause. It's a question professionals get a lot, and while it is something that can be done, I suspect it can also be done wrong. We brought in interior designer Sita Montgomery for some guidance. This is kind of one of those things, like I always think of, okay, can I mix my jewelry, my gold and silver jewelry? There's kind of some mixed perceptions about this.
Yeah, you know, it used to be that we thought, well, if we're gonna have oil rubbed bronze fixtures, then we have to have those throughout our home and we can't mix and match. And it was the same perception we had about bedroom furniture or living room furniture. We needed to buy everything in a set. Everything had to match and coordinate. And really design has, it's kind of evolved in the way that now we don't want to see anything that's matchy-matchy. And so that goes for furniture as well as for metal finishes in the home. We don't want to see the matchy-matchy anymore. So mixed metals is the way to go now.
But it needs to be thought out. So there is kind of a guiding light and principle behind mixing these metals successfully. And what's the first way to do that?
Yeah, so there are definitely some things you want to consider. The first one is that you want to choose a dominant metal. So if you are, say, in a home that's existing that you have lived in a while and there are a lot of brass tones or bronze tones in it, you want to make sure that you have a dominant metal that you're going to have as your main metal, and then you can add other metals in as accents. So it's important to make sure that you choose that dominant metal, and then you can add those other metals in to accent in places, but you want to make sure that for the most part, when your eye is looking at the space, it sees one dominant metal.
Okay, so are you picking like cabinet hardware and the lights? Would those be kind of your dominant places to look and pick a metal for?
You know what, you could actually change that up. Your lights can be brass and your metal can be chrome or silver. So that it's not necessarily the items, it's just that throughout your home, so from space to space. So say in my kitchen, my dominant metal is brass and I'm adding in accents of chrome or silver or even some bronze or copper. Then in the next room over, I want to make sure that that dominant metal again is that brass color, and then adding in accents again. It's nice to have, for the flow of the home and for the ease of the eye, to have the one dominant color that catches and then everything else just accents it.
Okay, so not thinking of just space by space, but you are thinking about the whole area and trying to make it all flow and go.
Yes. Yeah, and that's something interior designers are always looking at, is each space that's connected to each other within a home cohesive? So when you walk from room to room, does it feel disjointed or does it feel like one big space? Does everything have flow? And metals is a big part of that. We want to make sure that those metals are flowing from space to space.
Okay, and you're doing that by blending warm and cool tones. Can you mix up to 3 metals, or is there a limit to how many you should mix?
Yeah, so warm tone metals are those like the brasses and the coppers and the bronzes, and then cool tone metals are more of your chromes and your brushed silvers, but you can mix warm and cool tones, but you want to make sure that you're considering the palette of your room. So you want to make sure that if your room has a primarily warm tone in it, say you have lots of oranges and yellows and browns in your space, then you want to use maybe a warm tone metal like a brass as your dominant metal and then accent it with silvers.
Okay.
So if you have a primarily cool palette, which is like the blues and the greens and even some violets or purples, then you want to make sure that your dominant metal is more of like your silver and your chrome, and then accent it with warms and golds. And in terms of the number of metals, I say no more than 3. It can get a little crazy, but I tend to like 2 when I do it, but you can definitely do 3 and still be okay.
Okay, so you really are considering your palette. That's got to be kind of your number one thing. Consider your palette as you're adding in these different metals.
Yeah, and if you have a neutral space, say your room doesn't pull warm or cool. I am a neutral girl at heart. I say that all the time. A lot of the spaces in my home are neutral. So if you have a neutral space, you can really kind of choose, you know, what you want to be your dominant metal and then those accents that you want to come in. So neutral spaces are great. And if you really love, I've always loved the antique gold long before it was popular like it is now. And so I've always had that in my spaces. And I love just the warmth that it adds and the richness and the sophistication that adds to a space.
And you don't want to go too over the top. with this idea.
Yes. So the problem with adding metals is metallics are all the rage right now. We can find them in pillows and in light fixtures and, you know, in hardware and all of that and in tables. But we want to make sure that we're not overdoing the metals. We want to add some natural elements. So if you have a room that's accented with metals, make sure that you bring in some of those natural tones. So anything that is like a wood texture or a wood tone or something that has a duller painted finish, try to make sure that you're balancing all that metallic out with something that feels a bit more natural and subtle, that has maybe a matte finish to it, so that you don't feel overwhelmed, like it's not totally blinged out when you walk into a room.
So one more thing to add to the list is shiny versus a little more downplayed, brushed, or more subtle.
So I like mixing the two. If I'm going to use a really pretty, I mean, chrome is so beautiful and it reflects the light and it just pops and it just looks so beautiful in a space. But sometimes if I'm going to have a lot of chrome, I'm going to kind of make sure that we pull back a little bit on that shininess by adding those brushed brass or a satin nickel, something that has a dull or matte finish to it to kind of balance that out. So when you're looking at mixing your metals, the best things to do is to layer and to add not only the different tones, but the finish as well.
Okay, some of your favorite ways to add in these metals and metallics. Is it fabric? Is it the actual fixtures themselves, accessories?
Yeah, so it's mostly the fixture. So lighting is a huge one. Just changing out your lighting to a different finish can really make the space feel luxurious. Like I was saying, it used to be that we thought that a well-designed home had all one finish, and now what we're finding is that when you layer those metallics and you do it the right way, it actually ups the sophistication level and it makes it from being just a pretty space to a really well-designed space. So fixtures, hardware on cabinets, as well as bathroom fixtures and lighting are some of my favorite ways, but you can also put in drapery rods as well as furniture pieces that have metallic legs.
Yeah.
Yes, so there are so many ways to do it, and you don't have to start big. You can just add that metallic in slowly and get comfortable with it and then continue on from there.
And I imagine you have lots of ideas and inspiration on your website.
I do, so you can go to my website, which is sitamontgomeryinteriors.com, and then you can also find a lot of my work on Instagram at Sita Montgomery Interiors.
Okay, I'm one of your stalkers, so there are lots of inspiration on there. Thanks for
Thank
joining
you.
us, Sita. We appreciate it.